The problem that I'm going to talk about today is something that a lot of people do not seem to really notice, but only seem to notice when you start talking about it. It's like those creatures that wipe your mind as soon as you don't look at them from Doctor Who. This problem that I'm talking about, as you can guess from the title, Snowball effect. As it is now, Stellaris is a pretty standard 4X affair. You start exploring your surroundings, establish some initial assets and investments, select your strategy based on circumstances, and then go on a conquering spree, with each conquest making your next conquest easier because you have access to more resources. Sure, you could play peacefully and everything, but unfortunately if you're playing against other players, the one that is most aggressive is going to win. It's kind of a only optimal strategy. And that's very unfortunate, and I hope a solution to this problem is going to bring more alternatives of playstyles, and this also makes the game being decided in the first hour or two. Even if multiple players unite, their only hope would be to outmaneuver a player that already has conquered multiple planets and has a large fleet, and if they did not react in a short time to the enemy who has acquired a means to get stronger faster, then they can't really do anything, and it's all over for them, and the winner is decided, making the fate of the whole galaxy being decided in the first few decades of the game, throwing away a lot of the mechanics and the interesting parts of the game that, well, the game has to offer. Now, this is not bad in itself, if what you're looking for is Starcraft 2, except with a little bit more management. However, I think that Stellaris has been designed to be so much more than that, and to be a grand strategy. And to return back to being grand strategy, it has to strip the shackles of such lazy game design of just you collect resources to go to war and just defeat the other person. Now, it should always be a method to win, but it needs to be something that you need extensive amounts of planning, and the other person must be able to respond. It should not be that, oh, the first person to rush is the first one to win, and it only gets better from there. And as we all know, in real world, that's just not how it works. This problem is somewhat mitigated by reducing the speed of the game from fast to fastest to normal or slow, and spread the game over multiple sessions, thus letting players form diplomatic bonds with their neighbors. However, this diplomacy only prevents snowballing from happening in certain circumstances. There are no game mechanics to simulate the risks, complexities, and difficulties of running such an empire that is fueled by conquests. In fact, it's the opposite. The conquered people are just perfectly docile, happy to work just as hard for their new overlords, even if they are being genocided. This is nothing short of silly, and by that logic, all the uprisings, etc. should not have happened, and well, the empire should never fall, Even if you add some progression mechanics, more than that, you should add the system complexities, and this can be shown with an admin cap. Some people probably, do enjoy such simplicity, but that is just not the game is clearly made for. That's just not the niche and the strength of this game. Neither is it of Paradox. When you think of a Paradox title, sprawling, large, and complicated games with intricate mechanics that require you to master them, and not really to master them, but the process of mastering is the fun part, and after you master, an entire new world is open to you. There are plenty of the game that already provide that simple kind of gameplay, so why should Paradox try to do that? The Paradox games are more about greater control and simulation, hence why their games are on the genre of grand strategy instead of 4X. And it's time for Paradox 4X to be a bit more realistic and nuanced, where you must consider diplomacy, administration, instead of how you can maximize your alloy production and research. I think returning to admin cap being a factor, as well as other ways to show the difficulties of running a wide empire, will improve the game for everyone involved. Administrative capacity is a nebulous term that can serve as an anti-snowball mechanic, which it did used to, which can keep the game interesting at any phase. I mean, even with things such as mid and endgame crisis, it's not really the right fix. Stellaris needs to show that managing a large empire is fundamentally a different challenge, and by slowing down, snowballing, it can let other players to respond or catch up, preventing games from ending immediately and always creating tension and interest within the game. You know, just because, let's say, an empire won a war does not mean that the other empire just completely gets annexed instantly and all their people, yep, we are Roman now, yay! Yeah, that's not really a thing that happens. You know, wars are a convoluted affairs that should not really be this easy. It should not be Starcraft. This will let us have proper empire showdowns rather than what we have now, which is some sanitized, insurgency-free conquest of people who eat Xenos for breakfast and they're perfectly content because you landed some armies on their planets. And I can't be the only one who has a problem with this, you know. If Stellaris intends to simulate interstellar governance, it also needs to simulate the challenges of it, like Europa Universalis 4, and not make admin cap a problem that can be solved by throwing more pops at it, just like we have now. And even then, it's not an immediate problem. In contrast, the overextension mechanic in Europa Universalis 4 is simulating, I think, quite well. But I think it can be applied better because you have an opportunity to implement it better.